Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Renegade Immortal based on novel. So let's start. After a long time, the spiritual energy in Wang Lin's body settled down, and the spiritual energy around the area dissipated. The martial artists' heads suddenly became clear, as they talked among themselves about what they had just experienced. As the group kept moving forward, night eventually fell. A circle of carriages was formed on the side of the road. Some of the servant girls came down from the carriages and started to prepare dinner. Some of them threw a few looks at Wang Lin and talked among themselves. It was not hard to understand why all of the female servants were looking at Wang Lin. Right now, he had an unspeakable charm. Although his looks were normal, he had a very special aura about him. Wang Lin sat leaning against a big tree as he looked at the slowly darkening sky. He was experiencing a kind of peace of mind that he had never experienced in the past 400 years. This was from the ancient gods' inheritance of memory. Back when Sai wasn't able to travel among the stars, he often looked at the sky like this. This peace of mind caused the spiritual energy in Wang Lin's body to resurface again, but the current Wang Lin didn't pay attention to the spiritual energy, and for the first time, he noticed the red mist aura around him. The red substance slowly dissipated with his mind at peace. He knew that if he kept this up, then the red substance will disappear after several years. Wang Lin spent the night condensing the evil aura around him. The only sound at night, besides the crickets, was the snoring of some of the men. Gradually, the sun rose up in the sky and day replaced night. Wang Lin opened his eyes. He stared at the east and took a deep breath. Two purple chi dragons, invisible to mortal eyes, entered his body. The two chi dragons cycled once through his body, then exited it. The cycle continued. Wang Lin felt like his body was very light. It was as if he could just walk directly into the sky. This kind of feeling was something that Wang Lin had never experienced in the past 400 years. It was very clear that only after reaching a certain relaxed state of mind could he feel this aura from the heavens. In one night's time, the red substance around Wang Lin once again shrunk to 1/10 of its previous size. Wang Lin was in no rush. He knew that condensing this red substance was not something he could rush. He believed that it was something that will take a long time. Early in the morning, the people woke up one by one and washed themselves. The old man walked out of the carriage and took a deep breath. He started to perform different types of movements. After just one glance, Wang Lin was very shocked. Although this person's movements didn't have any offensive power, every move would strengthen the body. When used together, their effects were even better. A while later, the old man stopped and let out a sigh. He hesitated for a bit, then walked toward Wang Lin. When he got near, he smiled and asked, "Little brother, did you rest well last night?" Wang Lin silently nodded. The old man hesitated for a bit before asking, "I wanted to ask where little brother got that 100-year-old willow leaf." With that, his eyes were filled with a pleading look. Wang Lin said, "I picked it up on the side of the road." The old man thought about it for a long time. He bitterly smiled and said, "Little brother, you were very lucky." He chatted with Wang Lin for a while. No matter how he tried, he couldn't get any information out of Wang Lin. The old man secretly sighed as he turned around and left. If we were to compare ages, Wang Lin was old enough to be the old man's ancestor. The old man's trick might work on someone new to the world, but it was nothing compared to what Wang Lin had been through. While following the group, Wang Lin gradually adjusted himself and eventually became part of the group. Several days passed, and within these days, that little servant girl would always come to talk to Wang Lin. However, she would always talk for a while, then her little face would become red. No one knew what she was thinking. Wang Lin couldn't help but bitterly smile when he saw the light in the girl's eyes. He had seen that light in Li Muwen's eyes many times, so he knew what was going on. Wang Lin was very interested in these strange buildings. As the group entered the city, Lu Xing noticed that Wang Lin was still staring at the 9 black pillars, so he whispered, "Brother Wang, don't keep staring at them. If you are noticed by someone, there will be trouble." Wang Lin rubbed the horse and asked, "Brother Lu, what are these black pillars?" Lu Xing revealed a look of envy and whispered, "Those are immortal pillars. This place is my country's capital, so it's protected by immortals, which is why there are immortal pillars. The king recruited the best craftsmen in the country to craft these 9 pillars as the immortals requested, immortal pillars, Wang Lin's expression was strange. There are immortals living inside the immortal pillars. My father once personally saw immortals fly out of them. Lu Xing's voice was filled with pride. It was as if his father seeing an immortal was something that benefited him. If he knew that Wang Lin, whom he had spent the past 7 days with, was thousands of times stronger than the immortals that his ancestor saw, how would he feel? It has to be said that if the cultivator that his ancestor saw was present, that person would have to respectfully call Wang Lin Sr. Wang Lin withdrew his gaze. He smiled, but didn't speak. On a bridge between the northern and southern parts of the capital, Wang Lin said goodbye to Lu Xing's group. Although Lu Xing hadn't been together with Wang Lin for long, he was very fond of Wang Lin. He patted his chest and told Wang Lin that if he ever ran into any issues, he could go and find him for help. As for Lao Er, who had to give up his horse for Wang Lin, he had completely acknowledged him after drinking together so many times. Lu Xing also said that if someone bullied Wang Lin, he would personally get his boss to act. Finally, the old man walked out of the carriage. Behind him was a young lady with a white veil over her head. Next to her was the pretty servant girl. Seeing that Wang Lin was about to leave, the servant girl's eyes were filled with melancholy. The old man talked a bit with Wang Lin, and the lady with the veil over her head smiled. She didn't join in the conversation. After bowing, she turned around and left without a word. The servant girl exchanged a few words with the lady. She then took a little pouch and walked up to Wang Lin. She handed him the pouch and said, "Sister wants me to thank you. There are 10 pieces of gold here. This is the consultation fee." Wang Lin didn't refuse. It had been over 400 years since he had touched the mortal's currency. Wang Lin clasped his hands and turned around. It wasn't until Wang Lin was already far away that the servant girl sighed and returned to the carriage. The group passed over the bridge and entered the southern section of the city. Wang Lin pinched the 10 pieces of gold with his hand as he walked through the capital. This truly was the capital. There was an ocean of people and all sorts of vendors selling stuff on the streets. Shortly after, Wang Lin's eyes slightly lit up. In this capital of the mortal world, he saw many cultivators among the mortals. Although the highest level cultivators were only around the 12th or 14th layer of chi condensation, it was something that was very rare to see in other countries. A middle-aged man standing next to Wang Lin's side. That old man gets beaten up every day, just to see the female servants change. Is it worth it? Ah? Wang Lin was stunned. He looked at the old man before turning around to leave. But before he took more than a few steps, he turned around and saw the old man proudly walking toward Wang Lin as he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Wang Lin dodged to the side and his eyes became cold. The old man walked past Wang Lin. He didn't stop, but then suddenly turned around. His face was filled with surprise as he carefully examined Wang Lin and said, "Little brother, I see that you are filled with talent and energy. You don't seem to be a mortal." Wang Lin frowned. With his divine sense, he could easily see that this old man was only a mortal without any cultivation. This old man's body also contained many wounds. It was clear that they were the result of constant beatings. Wang Lin didn't have any interest in this person, so he turned around and left. If this old man kept bothering him, Wang Lin wouldn't mind helping him go to hell. The old man revealed a look of pity as he shook his head and said, "If there is no way to give you pointers, then you might never reach the soul formation stage." Sigh. Wang Lin suddenly stopped. All of the pressure in his body suddenly released. He turned around and stared at the old man. "Who are you?" he asked. The old man didn't feel any discomfort toward Wang Lin's pressure. He placed both of his hands behind his back, looked into the sky, and with a voice filled with age said, "You don't need to know who I am. You just need to know that I can help you reach the soul formation stage." Wang Lin's eyes lit up. No matter how he looked at this old man, he was merely a mortal, but the old man was able to instantly tell what his cultivation level was. The only possibility was that this old man's cultivation level was far above the soul formation stage. So when the old man hit his cultivation, Wang Lin wasn't able to detect it. Wang Lin frowned and asked, "How can I reach the soul formation stage?" The old man looked at Wang Lin and said, "I'm already old. The moment I get hungry, I can't remember anything. I know a very good restaurant. Let's go there and talk while we eat." He licked his lips while his stomach growled of hunger. Fortune Restaurant was one of the most luxurious restaurants in the capital. The old man walked in with this head up and his chest puffed. It seemed it was beneath the old man to eat in the main hall. After he entered, he walked directly into the private room. When the server saw the old man, his expression became strange, but when he saw Wang Lin walking behind the old man, he quickly went out to serve them. Wang Lin frowned very hard. He felt like there was something going on here. The old man seemed to be very familiar with this restaurant. He ordered a bunch of dishes that Wang Lin had never heard of. The table was covered with food and the old man started to eat as if he hadn't eaten in days. Wang Lin didn't say a word as he drank wine. His gaze swept past the old man and became even colder. After the old man had eaten for a while, Wang Lin coldly said, "I'm listening." The old man grabbed a piece of pork shoulder and took a big bite as he said, "This. Wait until I finish eating this piece." The old man shook his head and said, "Who I am is not important. How about we find a place to relax? While we relax, we can talk." Wang Lin's face became very dark. That middle-aged man was also a cultivator, but his cultivation level was only foundation establishment. It was very clear that this old man had learned these things to rip off cultivators. But that old man was still alive, so this matter didn't seem simple. Unless Wang Lin was the first person he had ever scammed, the old man wouldn't be alive today. If a cultivator was played by a mortal, then no matter who it was, they wouldn't let the old man off easily. What was most curious about all of this was that this old man seemed to have the ability to see through someone's cultivation instantly. If the person was a foundation establishment cultivator, he would say core formation. If the person was a core formation cultivator, he would say nascent soul, and if the person was like Wang Lin, who was at the nascent soul stage, he'd say soul formation. Wang Lin followed this old man the entire afternoon. He wanted to see what exactly this old man's secret was. In one afternoon's time, the old man had tricked a total of 4 people, including Wang Lin. What was interesting was that he only asked for food and drink. The worst it got was a trip to a brothel. But the 3 others, including the purple-robed man, didn't have any intentions of looking for revenge. It seemed the old man's words had some kind of magical effect on them. The more Wang Lin saw, the more shocked he was. The old man seemed to have a very good understanding of how to break into the next realm of cultivation. He could just casually say a few things and enlighten them. As a result, none of them believed that he was a scammer. Instead, they felt as if they had met a senior, so they became very respectful. After a while, Wang Lin began to ponder. Then, he withdrew his divine sense and stopped following the old man. This old man was too mysterious, and Wang Lin felt that it was better for him to not dig too much into it. The old man was holding a woman in his arms inside a brothel. As Wang Lin's divine sense withdrew, his eyes lit up. He faintly smiled as he looked at Wang Lin's direction and muttered, "Nascent soul, and the mid-stage of nascent soul. Should I help him?" As he was thinking, the woman in his arm called him with a flirty voice. The old man threw Wang Lin out of his mind and went to enjoy himself. After he stopped thinking about the old man, Wang Lin pondered for a while. He went to a remote area in the west side of the city and rented a shop for 8 pieces of gold. After he cleaned it out a bit, he moved in. If he wanted to reach the soul formation stage, then he must first transform into a mortal to experience mortal life and comprehend the heavens. This was a method that Wang Lin had thought of to break past the nascent soul stage. He calmly looked at the shop, then sat down cross-legged in the back room and began to experience the world of mortals. The current Wang Lin was camouflaged inside the populated mortal capital city, as he calmly began to comprehend the heavens and life and death. He was fully preparing himself to break past the boundary of the nascent soul stage and into the soul formation stage. The shop that Wang Lin rented wasn't on the main street, but to the side. If one didn't look for it, it was very difficult to find, but Wang Lin didn't mind. After a night of cultivating, the red substance around him condensed even more. When morning arrived, Wang Lin opened the door of the shop. Like a mortal, he cleaned the shop up. Then, his body moved and disappeared from the shop. When he returned, his bag of holding contained quite a few large trees that he had pulled up along with their roots. He cleaned the bark off the trees and turned them into wood blocks. Wang Lin began to recall his childhood, when his father taught him how to carve. These memories gradually filled his mind. Wang Lin pondered for a long time. He then grabbed a large, square block of wood. With a gentle wave of his hand, the square block of wood was cut into 10 pieces. Gradually, as Wang Lin carved, he seemed to gain something he had lost 400 years ago. With every stroke, he seemed to return to his childhood, back to when he lived in that small village. At that moment, the spiritual energy in Wang Lin's body began to move. It became deeply ingrained within the statue he was carving. Time flew by and night arrived again, when Wang Lin regained his senses. He looked at the block of wood in his hand. The block of wood had turned into a wood carving. The carving was that of a middle-aged man with a kind smile. The middle-aged man wore a coarse robe, and his hands were filled with rough lines. Although this wood carving was very rough, it seemed to be alive. Waves of spiritual energy spread out from the carving. As Wang Lin stared at the carving, he began to feel pain in his heart. His right hand gently rubbed the carving as he muttered, "Father, your son misses you greatly." After pondering for a long time, Wang Lin moved the wood carving to the side. He picked up another piece of wood and wholeheartedly began to carve again, stroke by stroke. The night began to get cold, but going a day without sleep was nothing for Wang Lin. Back when he was being chased, he would be running for days. The moment the sun rose, the carving that Wang Lin was working on took shape. This wood carving was shaped like a middle-aged woman. Her loving eyes looked into the distance, as if she was waiting for her child to return. He placed the two wood carvings next to each other, and let out a long sigh as he took out another piece of wood and began to carve. Time slowly passed. Wang Lin kept on carving and only took breaks when he became extremely tired. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The number of things in Wang Lin's shop gradually increased. The shelves along the wall of the shop were filled with wood carvings that looked alive. There were males and females, young people and old people, and all in various poses. These wood carvings were all residents of the village that was Wang Lin's hometown. In a way, Wang Lin had revived them. In this month, Wang Lin didn't have a single customer, but he didn't mind as he was immersed in carving. He even stopped cultivating. One day, Wang Lin held a half-completed wood carving in his hand. This wood carving, for some unknown reason, released a primal aura. If any cultivator from the Sea of Devils saw this carving, they would immediately recognize it as a dragon. This dragon was the first spirit beast that Wang Lin met when he was with Li Muwen. While he was carving, the bell rang as the door was pushed open by someone. A very strong-looking boy carefully looked inside. The boy saw Wang Lin and was startled, but he was immediately in awe after seeing all of the carvings in the room. He asked, "Uncle, did you carve all of this? They are so pretty. Can you give me one?" Wang Lin let out a smile and put down the carving in his hand. He grabbed a wood carving from one of the shelves. This was the carving of a person that Wang Lin was very familiar with, named Wang Hao. The boy before him looked similar to Wang Hao back then. After the boy received the wood carving, he let out a cheer. He held it in his hands like a treasure and said to Wang Lin, with a crisp voice, "Thank you, uncle. I'm from the iron workshop across the street. Goodbye." With that, he ran out of the shop and shouted, "Mom! Look! Uncle gave me this." Wang Lin stood up and walked to the entrance of the shop. He saw a man and woman come out of the shop across the street. The two looked lovingly at the boy. The man took the wood carving and his eyes suddenly lit up. He walked toward Wang Lin with the wood carving and said, "Little brother, kids don't know too well. How much for this carving?" Wang Lin shook his head and said, "I gave it to him. It is only a piece of wood." The boy's father hesitated for a bit. He looked at Wang Lin and smiled. "You just arrived here, correct? I haven't seen you before." Wang Lin smiled and nodded. The boy's father smiled and said, "Little brother, if you don't mind, come over for a meal. I have homemade fruit wine that is much better than those from those restaurants." Wang Lin felt a very strange feeling in his heart. This was a feeling he hadn't felt in 400 years. After hesitating for a bit, he nodded. The boy's mother was a very kind woman. Although she was very young, she was very patient and mild. From looking at them, Wang Lin could tell that they were a very happy family. Their child was cute and the couple loved each other. Life is like a bowl of water. In its blandness, there's a barely noticeable sweetness. Wang Lin felt like his soul was being cleansed by this life without killing. He forgot his identity as a cultivator and his 400 years of killing. He had truly blended into the mortal world and was experiencing the bitter and the sweet aspects of mortal life. Every morning, Wang Lin would get up and open the door to his shop before beginning to carve. His shop was already filled with countless wood carvings. All of the neighboring shops gradually found out that the shop Wang Lin was residing in had changed hands. Everyone had very good feelings toward this quiet and elegant young man. As time passed, Wang Lin gradually began to have customers. Although they couldn't see the spiritual energy in the wood carvings, they could see how intricate the carvings were. Over time, Wang Lin's shop gained a bit of fame in the area. In the blink of an eye, 1 year had passed. In this year, Wang Lin never saw that old man again. Although he would occasionally think about the old man, those thoughts gradually faded. He was completely immersed in carving, searching for that long-lost joy. In Wang Lin's shop, the most common carvings were these lifelike carvings of beasts. All of these beasts were creatures that mortals had never seen before. In fact, even if cultivators were to come, they would barely be able to recognize them. After all, this place was too far from the Sea of Devils. The world was large and there were many different types of beasts, so there was no way for one person to know them all. At the moment, Wang Lin held a square piece of wood in his hand. He moved his hand and a turtle-shaped beast gradually emerged from the piece of wood. Looking at the carving in his hand, he put down his carving knife and picked up a jug. Just as he was about to drink from it, he realized that there was no wine left. At this time, Dianyo would normally come to watch him carve and bring along a jug of wine. Sure enough, before long, Dianyo, who had grown a head taller in the past year, walked into the shop. Dianyo was that boy, and although he was only 12 years old, he was very tall. His body was much stronger than it was 1 year ago. After he entered the shop, he let out an unhappy sound as he sat down next to Wang Lin. He said, "Uncle Wang, you should go to my house sometime and talk with my dad. He is always making me learn the art of ironworks, but I don't want to learn. If anything, I want to learn Uncle's carving skills." With that, he placed the jug of wine next to Wang Lin. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the incomplete carving in Wang Lin's hand. Wang Lin laughed and took a gulp of the fruit wine. This fruit wine was sweet with a hint of spiciness, causing his belly to heat up. This wine had become a daily essential to Wang Lin over the past year. Dianyo looked at the carving. Confused, he asked, "Uncle Wang, what animal are you carving now? Why does it look like a turtle?" Wang Lin rubbed Dianyo's head and said, "This is not a turtle, but a creature called Zhongjiyu. Although it looks like a turtle, it is far more powerful." Dianyo uncertainly nodded. In this past year, he had seen all kinds of animals inside Wang Lin's shop, and every single one of them were ones he had never seen before. Wang Lin held the carving knife and began to carve the creature's features stroke by stroke. This turtle-looking creature was in fact a rare, mid-quality spirit beast in this Sea of Devils. If it became angry, normal cultivators wouldn't be able to withstand its strength at all. But Wang Lin had killed many of these types of beasts, and he has consumed a lot of their cores. Thus, its image completely formed in Wang Lin's mind and his hand didn't pause for a single moment. Half an hour later, Wang Lin poked hard at where its eyes were supposed to be. At that moment, the carving seemed to have come to life. The beast looked into the sky. Its eyes revealed a hint of frustration and fear. Its mouth wide was opening as if it were letting out waves of silent roars. An invisible aura that's impossible for mortals to detect spread out from it. But as the aura spread out, Wang Lin touched it with his right hand and the aura disappeared. Wang Lin took a deep breath and casually put the carving on a shelf. In this past year, Wang Lin found that he could only carve up to mid-quality spirit beasts. As for high-quality spirit beasts, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't complete the carving. Every time he tried to carve a high-quality spirit beast, he would lose control during the last few strokes, causing the carving to shatter. Wang Lin understood that this was because his cultivation level wasn't high enough. After all, a high-quality spirit beast was the same as the soul formation stage for humans. Dianyo's eyes revealed a mesmerized look. In this past year, he had come to watch Wang Lin carve every day. He gradually became addicted. In this past year, he secretly tried to carve with a carving knife, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't carve anything decent. Now that he saw Wang Lin easily finish a carving, he couldn't hold it in anymore and asked Wang Lin. Wang Lin pondered a little. He raised his head and said to the boy, "Carving requires comprehension. If you want to learn, then you must watch me for 60 years. After 60 years, you can carve on your own." Dianyo stuck out his tongue and said, "60 years, but I've seen the carpenter in the southern part of the city. He is only 40 years old, but his carvings are pretty good too." Wang Lin drank a gulp of wine and said, I'm different from him. Daenyo's eyes were filled with confusion. He clearly didn't understand the meaning in those words. At that moment, loud noises suddenly came from outside. Daenyo ran outside. Not long after, he poked his head back in and said, "Uncle Wang, the Shu family's eldest son came back. He is followed by more than 10 carriages and a lot of people. He looks very cool." With that, he ran out again. Wang Lin didn't mind. He picked up another piece of wood and began to recall the scenes from the land of the ancient god, of that large desolate beast that left a deep impression in his mind. He hesitated for a while, then began to carve again. Time slowly passed. More than an hour later, the door to the shop was opened by someone. Daenyo happily came in. Behind him was a very sturdy-looking young man. The young man looked around at the carvings and his eyes lit up. Daenyo quickly walked next to Wang Lin. He made a few expressions and whispered, "Don't try to sell them for too much." With that, he quickly turned around and loudly said, "Master Shu, this is the shop I was telling you about. Look at these carvings. They are in no way inferior Carpenter Jew's products. How about buying a few?" Wang Lin smiled. This Daenyo obviously saw that Wang Lin had many customers in this past year, so when a rich person came by, he pulled that person to Wang Lin's shop. The young man named Shu looked around the shop, and his eyes became even brighter. He was very different from Daenyo. He had seen a lot, especially after becoming confidant of Lord Nan's son. He could tell with a glance that the quality of these carvings was several times higher than the famous Carpenter Jew's carvings. Although Carpenter Jew's carvings were also very lifelike, they were still missing something. After pondering a little, he finally understood. The one thing that Carpenter Jew's carvings were missing was life. One seemed almost real and one seemed almost alive. A one-word difference made them miles apart. The young man named Shu's eyes were shining as he walked up and picked up a carving. This carving was the dragon that Wang Lin had carved 1 year ago. The dragon's body was coiled, its head was facing the sky, and every scale on its body was expertly carved. What shocked the young man named Shu the most was that when he held the carving, he felt like it was alive. Terrified, his right hand suddenly loosened and the carving fell to the ground. Daenyo already knew the expression on the young man's face, and he also knew that when someone touches the carving, they experience a mysterious feeling, which was why he mostly looked and rarely touched them. With a thud, the carving fell to the ground. Good thing it was made of wood, because falling to the ground occasionally won't break it. The young man named Shu's face turned red and he said, "Master Wang, what animal is this? Why does it look a bit like a snake to me?" Before Wang Lin replied, Daenyo puffed his chest and said, "This is a dragon." "Do you know what a dragon is?" "It is an immortal creature, dragon." The young man named Shu remembered that name and asked, "For how much are you selling this dragon carving?" Wang Lin casually smiled and said, 10 pieces of gold. The moment Daenyo heard this, he secretly sighed and thought that it was over. He had brought quite a few people to this shop in the past year, but every time people heard the prices, they would shake their heads and leave. But he couldn't believe that the young man named Shu only frowned and put 10 pieces of gold down on the table. The young man took off his coat, wrapped it around the dragon carving, and quickly left. Daenyo stared dumbfoundedly at the 10 pieces of gold on the table. His eyes shined as he muttered, "Incredible, a single wood carving can sell for 10 pieces of gold. My dad can only make 1 piece of gold with 1 month of work, and even that is rare." After muttering to himself, he made a decision. It was only 60 years. He will do whatever it takes to learn this art. Once he has it mastered, he won't have to worry about money for the rest of his life. The current him didn't think about how it would take 60 years before he could create carvings. Even if he didn't have to worry about money, that was only in 60 years. The young man named Shu left the shop and quickly went home to say goodbye to his parents. He didn't even eat the dinner his parents prepared and quickly took all of the people and rushed back toward Nan Palace in the east side of the city. Wang Lin grabbed the gold on the table and casually threw it into a small basket without looking. As for the carvings in the store, aside from the ones of his parents and loved ones, he didn't care about them at all. These things were only tools in his eyes. Tools to help him calm his heart and comprehend the heavens. He believed that when he can carve a statue of a spirit-forming cultivator or spirit beast, his cultivation will have a breakthrough. Daenyo left the shop in a trance. As he walked, he kept muttering to himself, but no one knew what he was muttering about. Wang Lin took a gulp of fruit wine and continued to immerse himself in carving again. As he carved, wood shavings fell to the ground and the block of wood took shape. A powerful aura came from the carving, but the aura couldn't spread and was trapped inside the carving. With every stroke of his carving knife, the aura became even stronger. Slowly, the shape of a large dragon appeared on the wood, but Wang Lin's carving knife began to hesitate. He pondered for a long time and then let out a sigh. The carving knife disappeared from his hand. With his left hand, he casually tossed the incomplete carving into a large box. Inside the box were more than a dozen incomplete carvings. If one looked closely at these carvings, they would see that they were various people and spirit beasts. Hunchback Meng, Ancient Emperor, Six Desire Devil Lord, high-quality spirit beasts, and even desolate beasts. Although these carvings were all of different things, the one thing they had in common was that they were all carvings of people and beasts above the soul formation level. In this past year, Wang Lin had tried multiple times to carve a person or spirit beast that was at the soul formation level, but they all failed. If he forced himself to complete the carving, then the carving would turn into dust. He pondered a little with his eyes closed. Suddenly, a red substance about 1 palm thick appeared around him. The red substance was the evil aura that had been condensed a lot by Wang Lin this past year. Wang Lin was very satisfied with the result. He actually didn't forcefully condense the evil aura, it just naturally happened thanks to his actions. Wang Lin believed that in just 1 more year, he will be able to compress this evil aura to its limit. Getting rid of this evil aura won't raise his cultivation level though. But Wang Lin always believed that if he just lets this evil aura disappear, he will regret it in the future. It was the instinct of a cultivator that knows that they might need something in the future that made Wang Lin decide to condense the evil aura. Da Nyo's father's voice came in from outside. "Brother Wang, your sister-in-law has made a few good dishes today. Come over and eat, then us brothers can drink a few cups." Wang Lin's eyes suddenly opened, revealing an ancient light. The light slowly disappeared and Wang Lin went back to being a normal person. He held the jug, walked 2 steps, then hesitated for a bit before grabbing some gold from the basket and walked out. As for that young man named Shu, he was currently sitting in his carriage. His heart was pounding as he held the package in his hands. His eyes were filled with excitement. He didn't think that his visit home to see his parents would allow him to meet a person that could create this kind of wood carving. It can be said that the king's only hobby was to collect these kinds of things. Whether it was made of stone or wood, it didn't matter what kind of material. As long as it was a sculpture, the king liked them. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.